The measuring tape stretched across my driveway like a crime scene boundary. Linda Patterson stood there with her clipboard, documenting what she called evidence of my family's criminal behavior. Her voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "This ends today. I am placing your wife under citizen's arrest for criminal trespassing and violation of community standards." My blood turned to ice as I watched this HOA president point her finger at Sarah, who had just stepped out of her patrol car after a 12-hour shift. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Linda had no idea she was about to arrest the one person in our entire county who had the real authority to arrest her. The crowd of neighbors had gathered like spectators at a gladiator match. Everyone sensed something big was about to happen. They had no idea how big. That was the moment everything changed forever. 6 months earlier, Sarah and I thought we had found paradise. Willowbrook Estates stretched before us like something from a magazine cover. Every lawn was emerald green and cut to exactly 2.5 inches. Every mailbox stood at the same height. Every driveway was power washed to perfection. The houses looked like they had been built by the same architect using the same blueprint, then painted in approved shades of beige, cream, and light gray. Not a single flower grew where it was not supposed to grow. Not a single car sat where it was not supposed to sit. "This place is incredible," I told Sarah as we pulled into our new driveway for the first time. "It looks like a movie set." Sarah smiled, but I caught something in her expression, something that looked like concern. "It does look perfect," she said. "Maybe too perfect." Before we could even unpack our first box, Linda Patterson appeared at our front door. She looked like she had stepped out of a military recruitment poster. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her clothes were pressed and spotless. Her smile was bright and cold at the same time. "Welcome to Willowbrook Estates," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I am Linda Patterson, your HOA president. I brought you something to get started." She handed me a thick binder that felt like it weighed 10 pounds. The cover read Willowbrook Estates Community Covenant and Standards Manual 2024 edition, 47 pages. 47 pages, I asked, flipping through sections titled Acceptable Paint Colors, Lawn Maintenance Requirements, and Vehicle Parking Restrictions. "Every single rule is important," Linda said. Her voice carried the tone of someone who was used to being obeyed without question. "We have worked very hard to maintain the highest standards in this community. Property values depend on everyone following these guidelines exactly." Over the next few weeks, I watched Linda patrol the neighborhood like a general inspecting troops. She carried a clipboard and a measuring tape everywhere she went. She took photographs of anything that looked even slightly out of place. She knocked on doors to remind people about garbage can placement and holiday decoration removal dates. Sarah worked long hours at her job, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark. She never talked much about work, except to say it was demanding and stressful. I knew she held some kind of leadership position in law enforcement, but the details remained vague. She preferred to leave work at work. "I just want to come home and relax," she would say. "I deal with enough conflict during the day." The problem started with Sarah's patrol car. Her job required her to take it home every night. The black and white vehicle sat in our driveway like a beacon, clearly marking our house as different from all the others. I should have known Linda would have a problem with it. I should have seen the storm clouds gathering. But I was too busy trying to make our new house feel like home. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was underestimating exactly how far Linda Patterson was willing to go to enforce her vision of suburban perfection. The war began with a simple piece of paper tucked under our windshield wiper, but wars have started over less. The first violation notice appeared on a Tuesday morning like a declaration of war. The bright orange paper fluttered against the windshield of Sarah's patrol car, held in place by the wiper blade. Notice of community standards violation, I read aloud. Commercial vehicle parked in residential driveway. Fine, $50. Deadline for compliance, 48 hours. Sarah studied the notice with the calm expression she always wore when dealing with problems. Commercial vehicle, she said. This is a county patrol car. I am required to take it home. Linda does not care about requirements, I said. She only cares about her rules. The next morning brought Linda herself, marching across our front yard with her measuring tape and camera. She documented the patrol car from every angle, taking pictures that would make a crime scene photographer proud. "Excuse me," I called from the front door. "What are you doing?" "Gathering evidence," Linda replied without looking up. "This commercial vehicle violation is creating a precedent that threatens our entire community standard. Other residents are starting to ask questions about the rules." "It is not a commercial vehicle," I said. "It belongs to the county police department." Linda finally looked at me with the expression of someone explaining mathematics to a child. Any vehicle used for business purposes is commercial by definition. The HOA covenant is very clear about this. Over the next week, Linda's campaign intensified. She knocked on our door every morning to remind us about the unpaid fine. She left additional notices on the car. She started visiting other neighbors to build support for her enforcement action. Linda came by yesterday. Our next-door neighbor Mike told me while we were both getting our mail. She wanted to know if we were bothered by your police car. "What did you tell her?" Mike shrugged. "I told her I sleep better knowing there is a cop living next door, but she did not seem to like that answer." Sarah's response to the harassment was measured and professional. When Linda confronted her directly, she listened without raising her voice or losing her composure. "I understand your concern about community standards," Sarah told Linda during one of these encounters. "But I want you to understand that parking this vehicle in my driveway is not optional. It is a job requirement." "Job requirements do not override HOA covenants," Linda shot back. "I have been doing this for 8 years. I know what I am talking about." "I am sure you do," Sarah said. Her tone remained calm, but I caught something underneath it, something that sounded like a warning. "I just want to make sure you understand the full situation before this goes any further." Linda must have missed the warning entirely. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. The fines kept coming. $50 became $100. 100 became 200. Each notice carried stronger language about legal action and property liens. Linda also began recruiting allies from the HOA board. She scheduled special meetings to discuss what she called the parking crisis. She created a presentation with photographs and property value statistics. "This is not just about one car," she announced at a board meeting I attended. "This is about whether we are going to maintain the standards that make Willowbrook Estates the premier community in the county." The other board members nodded along, but I could see doubt in their eyes. Linda's obsession with our patrol car was starting to make them uncomfortable. "Maybe we could make an exception for law enforcement," suggested board member Janet Williams. "Exceptions lead to chaos," Linda replied firmly. "If we make one exception, everyone will want one. Before you know it, we will have delivery trucks and construction vehicles parked in every driveway." That night, I found Sarah sitting at our kitchen table, staring at the latest violation notice. Her jaw was tight in a way I had rarely seen. "This is getting ridiculous," I said. "Maybe we should just park the car on the street." Sarah shook her head. "I am not going to be bullied by someone who does not understand what she is dealing with." I had no idea how right she was. The certified letter arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by a postal worker who looked apologetic about the whole thing. The return address read Patterson Legal Services, HOA Enforcement Division. I tore open the envelope with shaking hands. The letter inside was written in formal legal language that made my head spin, but the message was crystal clear. Linda was threatening to place a lien on our property for unpaid HOA fines. The total amount had somehow grown to $800. "They are threatening our house," I told Sarah when she got home that evening. "Linda is actually threatening to take our house over a parking space." Sarah read the letter twice, her expression growing darker with each paragraph. "She does not have the authority to do this," she said finally. "HOA liens require specific legal procedures and justifiable cause." "Try telling that to Linda." "Maybe I will." The next week brought news of an emergency HOA board meeting called specifically to address what Linda had started calling the parking violation crisis. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening in the community center, and every resident received a formal invitation. "This is it," I told Sarah. "She is going to try to humiliate us in front of the entire neighborhood." "Let her try," Sarah said. Her voice carried a confidence that surprised me. Thursday evening arrived gray and cold. The community center parking lot filled up faster than I had ever seen it. Residents who had never attended an HOA meeting were showing up out of curiosity. Word had spread about the conflict, and people wanted to see how it would end. Inside the meeting room, Linda had prepared like a trial attorney. She had set up a projector and screen. She had blown up photographs of our driveway to poster size. She had prepared charts showing property values and community standards compliance rates. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda began, standing at the front of the room like a prosecutor addressing a jury, "we are here tonight to address a serious threat to everything we have built in Willowbrook Estates." She clicked through her presentation with military precision. Each slide showed another angle of Sarah's patrol car, another violation of community standards, another threat to property values. "This commercial vehicle represents a dangerous precedent," Linda continued. "If we allow one resident to ignore our covenants, others will follow. Our property values will decline. Our community standards will collapse." I watched the faces in the audience. Some residents looked convinced by Linda's presentation. Others looked skeptical. Most just looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. "I have attempted to resolve this matter through normal channels," Linda said. "I have issued multiple violations. I have offered reasonable accommodation. The residents have refused to cooperate." That was when Sarah walked through the back door. She had just finished a long shift and was still in her full police uniform. Her badge caught the light from the projector. Her radio crackled softly on her shoulder. She looked tired but alert, like someone who had dealt with difficult situations before. The room fell completely silent. Linda stopped talking mid-sentence. Every head turned to watch Sarah walk down the center aisle and take a seat in the front row. "Please continue," Sarah said politely. "I am interested in hearing your presentation." Linda's face went through several color changes, but she managed to compose herself. "As I was saying," she continued, "the residents have shown complete disregard for community standards and legal authority." She clicked to her final slide, which showed a timeline of violations and unpaid fines. The total amount of unpaid violations now exceeds $800. If this matter is not resolved immediately, I will have no choice but to pursue legal remedies. What kind of legal remedies? Asked someone from the audience. Property liens, civil lawsuits, whatever it takes to enforce our covenants, Linda replied. I have researched the law extensively. The HOA has broad authority to protect community interests. Sarah raised her hand. May I ask a question? Linda hesitated, but she was trapped by the formal meeting rules. Of course. Have you consulted with an attorney about the legal basis for these enforcement actions? I have done extensive research, Linda replied. I know what I am talking about. I am sure you do, Sarah said. Her tone was respectful but somehow ominous. I just want to make sure everyone understands the legal implications of what you are proposing. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. People were starting to sense that something bigger was happening. Linda had expected to deliver a crushing victory, but instead she found herself being questioned by someone who clearly understood legal procedures. Do you have any other questions? Linda asked, trying to regain control of the room. Just one more, Sarah said. Are you familiar with the laws regarding harassment and filing false legal claims? The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Linda's face went pale, but she stuck to her guns. I am enforcing legitimate HOA covenants, she said. That is not harassment. Sarah nodded slowly. I see. Thank you for clarifying your position. I had no idea what Sarah was thinking, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Linda had just painted herself into a corner, and she did not even know it yet. The trap was set. All that remained was springing it. The phone calls started the next morning. Linda had apparently spent the entire night researching what she believed were her legal options, and she was ready to escalate the conflict to criminal territory. I want to report a criminal trespassing violation, I heard her telling someone on the phone from her front yard. Her voice carried across the space between our houses like a siren. Yes, criminal trespassing. They are parking an unauthorized commercial vehicle on HOA property in direct violation of community covenants. I watched from our kitchen window as Linda paced back and forth, gesturing dramatically while she spoke. She had her clipboard in one hand and her phone in the other, clearly believing she was building a criminal case. What do you mean you cannot help me? Linda's voice rose in frustration. I am the HOA president. I have legal authority to enforce community standards. The conversation continued for several minutes, with Linda becoming increasingly agitated. When she finally hung up, she immediately dialed another number. Sheriff's Department. I need to speak to someone about filing charges for criminal trespassing and commercial vehicle violations. By noon, Linda had called every law enforcement agency in the county. Each conversation followed the same pattern. She would explain her position with complete confidence, then grow frustrated when they failed to share her interpretation of the law. That afternoon, she appeared at our front door with a different approach. She had printed out several pages from the internet about citizens' arrest laws and property rights. I have been researching the legal options available to me, she announced when I answered the door. Did you know that private citizens have the right to make arrests for criminal violations committed in their presence? Linda, please, I said. This is getting out of hand. Out of hand, she repeated. What is out of hand is your wife thinking she can ignore the law just because she wears a uniform. Her words hit me like a slap. Linda had finally revealed what this was really about. She was not just angry about parking violations or community standards. She was angry about authority. She was angry that someone in a uniform thought they could challenge her control. "You need to understand something," Linda continued. "I have been running this community for 8 years. I know every rule, every law, every procedure. Your wife might think she has authority somewhere else, but this is my jurisdiction." That evening, Sarah came home to find Linda waiting in our driveway with her camera and measuring tape. This time, Linda was not taking pictures of the car. She was taking pictures of Sarah. "Excuse me," Sarah said as she got out of the patrol car. "What are you doing?" "Documenting evidence," Linda replied. "I am building a case for criminal trespassing charges." Sarah's expression did not change, but I could see the muscles in her jaw tighten. "Criminal trespassing, for parking in my own driveway. For parking a commercial vehicle on private HOA property in violation of community covenants," Linda corrected. "The covenants have the force of law." "I see," Sarah said. "And who exactly do you plan to file these charges with?" "I have been in contact with multiple law enforcement agencies," Linda said proudly. "I am also researching my rights under citizens' arrest statutes." The words hung in the air like thunder before lightning. Sarah stood perfectly still for a long moment, studying Linda with the expression of someone evaluating a dangerous situation. "Let me make sure I understand," Sarah said finally. "You are threatening to arrest me for parking my work vehicle in my own driveway?" "If necessary, yes," Linda replied. "I have the legal authority to detain anyone who commits a criminal violation in my presence." "And you believe that parking this vehicle constitutes a criminal violation?" "Absolutely." Sarah nodded slowly. "I want to make sure you understand the legal implications of what you are proposing. Filing false charges or making false imprisonment threats are serious criminal offenses." Linda's confidence never wavered. "I have done my research. I know what I am talking about." "I am sure you have," Sarah said. "I just want to give you one more chance to reconsider this course of action." By this time, neighbors had started gathering to watch the confrontation. Word was spreading through the community that something big was happening in our driveway. People emerged from their houses like spectators drawn to a car accident. Linda seemed to feed off the attention. Having an audience made her more aggressive, more confident in her position. "I am done with warnings and violations," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Tomorrow morning, if this commercial vehicle is still parked here, I will place the owner under citizen's arrest for criminal trespassing." The crowd of neighbors grew larger. Some were recording the confrontation with their phones. Others were whispering among themselves about what they were witnessing. Sarah looked around at the assembled crowd, then back at Linda. "You are absolutely certain about this course of action?" "Completely certain," Linda replied. "I have been enforcing HOA covenants for 8 years. I know exactly what my authority allows me to do." "All right then," Sarah said quietly. "I guess we will see what happens tomorrow morning." As Sarah walked toward our front door, I caught something in her expression that made my blood run cold. It was not anger or fear. It was the look of someone who had just watched their opponent make a fatal mistake. Linda had no idea she had just declared war on the one person in the county who could destroy her completely. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. The next morning arrived gray and tense, like the air before a thunderstorm. Linda appeared in our driveway at exactly 8 o'clock, armed with her clipboard, her camera, and what she believed was the legal authority to arrest my wife. The crowd of neighbors had grown overnight. Word had spread throughout Willowbrook Estates that something dramatic was about to happen. People stood on their front porches, gathered in small groups on the sidewalk, and lined up along the street like spectators at a parade. Sarah emerged from our house in her full police uniform, badge gleaming in the morning light. She walked toward her patrol car with the same calm confidence she always displayed, completely unbothered by the circus that had formed around our driveway. "Stop right there," Linda commanded, stepping directly into Sarah's path. "I am placing you under citizen's arrest for criminal trespassing and commercial vehicle violations." The crowd fell completely silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Everyone sensed that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face Linda with an expression of mild curiosity. "You are placing me under arrest." "That is correct," Linda said, her voice carrying across the silent neighborhood. "You are in violation of community covenants and county ordinances. I have the legal authority to detain you until proper authorities arrive." "I see," Sarah said. "And what proper authorities would those be?" "The county sheriff's department," Linda replied confidently. "I have already contacted them about this situation." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors looked confused. Others looked concerned. A few looked like they were starting to understand that something was very wrong with Linda's plan. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "The county sheriff's department, that is an interesting choice." "Why is that interesting?" Linda demanded. Sarah reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out her badge wallet. She held it up so that Linda could see it clearly. "Because," Sarah said in a voice that carried to every corner of the crowd, "I am Chief Sarah Martinez of the County Sheriff's Department." The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Gasps echoed from every direction. Several people actually took steps backward as if they had been pushed. Linda's face went through a series of transformations that would have been comical if they were not so devastating. Confusion gave way to shock. Shock gave way to horror. Horror gave way to the terrible realization that she had just threatened to arrest her own boss. "That is not possible," Linda whispered, but her voice cracked on the words. "I am afraid it is very possible," Sarah replied, her tone remaining professional but somehow more commanding than before. "I have been the chief of the county sheriff's department for 3 years. Every deputy, every detective, every patrol officer in this county reports to me." The crowd erupted in whispered conversations. People were pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Others were calling friends and family to tell them about the drama unfolding in Willowbrook Estates. Linda tried desperately to recover her composure. "I had no way of knowing," she stammered. "You never told anyone what you did for work." "You never asked," Sarah replied. "You were too busy threatening to arrest me." "This is all a misunderstanding," Linda said, backing away from Sarah. "I was just trying to enforce community standards." "By threatening to place a police chief under citizen's arrest?" Sarah asked. "For parking her patrol car in her own driveway?" The crowd pressed closer, sensing that the real show was just beginning. Linda found herself surrounded by neighbors who had endured years of her tyrannical rule, all of them now witnessing her complete humiliation. "Let me explain something to you," Sarah continued, her voice taking on the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Filing false charges against a police officer is a serious criminal offense. Threatening false imprisonment is another serious criminal offense. Harassment and stalking are also criminal offenses." Linda's face went pale. "I was not harassing anyone. I was enforcing HOA covenants." "Were you?" Sarah asked. Because from where I stand, it looks like you have been conducting a systematic campaign of harassment against a police officer and her family. You have made threats, filed false claims, and attempted to use your HOA position to intimidate law enforcement. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was no longer a neighborhood dispute about parking rules. This had become a criminal investigation, and everyone could feel the shift in power. I want to make something very clear, Sarah continued. Every phone call you made to law enforcement agencies, every threat you made, every violation you issued, all of it has been documented. All of it can be used as evidence in a criminal prosecution. Linda opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She stood there in the middle of our driveway, surrounded by neighbors, facing the complete destruction of everything she thought she knew about power and authority. "Do you have anything else to say?" Sarah asked. Linda shook her head slowly, the fight completely drained out of her. "Good," Sarah said, "because I have plenty more to say." The revelation had shattered Linda's world completely, but Sarah was not finished with her yet. The aftermath of Sarah's revelation unfolded like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Linda stood frozen in the center of our driveway, her clipboard hanging limply at her side, while the crowd of neighbors processed what they had just witnessed. Sarah pulled out her official badge and held it where everyone could see it clearly. "I want to make sure everyone understands what has happened here," she announced to the crowd. "This is an official warning about harassment, filing false police reports, and making threats against law enforcement officers." Linda finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate whisper. "I did not know. How could I have known?" "You could have asked," Sarah replied firmly. "Instead, you chose to threaten arrest, file false charges, and harass my family for months. Your ignorance of my profession does not excuse your criminal behavior." That was when the floodgates opened. Other neighbors who had suffered under Linda's tyrannical rule for years suddenly found the courage to speak up. "She threatened to fine me $300 for planting roses in the wrong color," called out Mrs. Chen from across the street. "She made me repaint my entire house because the beige was 2 shades too dark," added Mike from next door. "She called the police on my 16-year-old son for skateboarding in our own driveway," shouted another neighbor. The crowd grew angrier as each story was shared. Years of accumulated resentment toward Linda's abuse of power suddenly had a voice. The neighbors who had been too afraid to challenge her individually were now united in their opposition. Sarah listened to each complaint with the professional attention of someone taking witness statements. "These are all serious allegations of harassment and abuse of authority," she said. "I want everyone to know that HOA positions do not grant special legal powers. Board members cannot arrest people, cannot file criminal charges, and cannot threaten homeowners with imprisonment." Linda tried desperately to salvage her position. "I was just trying to maintain community standards," she protested. "Property values depend on everyone following the rules." "Property values depend on people wanting to live here," replied Janet Williams, the board member who had suggested making an exception for law enforcement vehicles. "And nobody wants to live in a community run by a bully." The other HOA board members, who had been conspicuously silent during Linda's presentation at the previous meeting, now stepped forward to distance themselves from her actions. "The board never authorized these extreme enforcement measures," said Board Treasurer Tom Reynolds. "Linda has been acting on her own authority." "What authority?" Sarah asked pointedly. "HOA board members are volunteers who help maintain community amenities. They are not law enforcement officers. They have no legal power to arrest anyone or file criminal charges. Linda's last desperate attempt at maintaining control fell completely flat. I researched the laws, she insisted. I know what citizens' arrest statutes allow. Citizens' arrest laws apply to actual crimes committed in your presence, Sarah explained to the crowd. Parking a patrol car in a driveway is not a crime. Violating HOA covenants is not a crime. What you have been doing, however, does constitute criminal harassment. The crowd murmured their agreement. Linda looked around desperately for support but found none. Even her allies on the HOA board were backing away from her. I think it would be best if you resign from the board, Janet Williams said quietly. This situation has gotten completely out of hand. You cannot make me resign, Linda shot back, but her voice lacked its usual authority. Actually, we can, Tom Reynolds replied. The board has the power to remove members who abuse their authority or bring the community into disrepute. Sarah stepped forward again, her presence commanding immediate attention. I want to be very clear about something, she said. I am not going to file criminal charges over this incident, but I am going to make sure everyone understands their rights and responsibilities going forward. She turned to address the entire crowd. HOA board members are your neighbors, not your rulers. They cannot arrest you, fine you beyond what your covenants specify, or threaten you with imprisonment. If anyone tries to abuse their authority in the future, you have the right to call the real police. The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time in years, the residents of Willowbrook Estates felt like they had protection from the tyrant who had made their lives miserable. Linda stood alone in the center of it all, her kingdom of petty authority crumbling around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. The resignation letter arrived in every resident's mailbox 3 days later. Linda Patterson, citing personal reasons and health concerns, was stepping down from her position as HOA president effective immediately. The letter was brief and formal, containing none of the pompous language that had characterized her previous communications. There was no admission of wrongdoing, no acknowledgement of the damage she had caused, and no real apology for years of harassment and intimidation. Even in defeat, she still does not get it, I told Sarah as we read the letter together. Some people never do, Sarah replied. They cannot admit they were wrong because that would mean admitting they were never really in control to begin with. The community transformation was swift and dramatic. Janet Williams was elected as the new HOA president by unanimous vote, and her first official act was to revise the parking policies to allow law enforcement and emergency vehicles in residential driveways. These are the people who keep us safe, she announced at the first board meeting following Linda's resignation. The least we can do is make sure they feel welcome in their own neighborhood. The new board also implemented a formal complaint process for residents who felt they were being harassed or treated unfairly by HOA enforcement. They established clear guidelines about what constituted legitimate violations versus personal vendettas. Linda's attempted apology came 2 weeks later, delivered personally to our front door. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of the authority that had defined her identity for so many years. I want you to know that I never meant for things to go so far, she said, standing awkwardly on our front porch. I was just trying to do my job. Sarah listened politely, but her expression remained neutral. Your job was to help maintain community amenities, she replied, not to harass your neighbors or threaten law enforcement officers. I realize that now, Linda said, though her tone suggested she was saying what she thought we wanted to hear rather than expressing genuine understanding. After Linda left, Sarah and I stood on our front porch looking out at the neighborhood that had become our home. The same pristine lawns and perfect mailboxes were still there, but something fundamental had changed. "Do you think she learned anything from this?" I asked. Sarah shook her head. "People like Linda rarely learn. They just find new places to exercise the same behavior." She was right. Within a month, Linda had moved out of Willowbrook Estates entirely. Rumors circulated that she was already looking for a new community where she could start fresh, presumably without the baggage of her previous reputation. The story of what happened in our driveway spread far beyond our neighborhood. Other HOA communities heard about the police chief, who had been threatened with arrest by her own board president. The tale became a cautionary story about the dangers of unchecked authority and the importance of treating people with respect regardless of their apparent status. Sarah handled her unexpected fame with the same grace she brought to everything else. When reporters called asking for interviews, she politely declined. "This was never about me," she told them. "This was about one person abusing their authority and the community finding the courage to stand up to a bully." As I reflect on everything that happened, the most striking thing is how quickly a toxic situation can be transformed when people find the courage to challenge abuse of power. For years, Linda had ruled through fear and intimidation, but it only took one moment of truth to reveal that her authority was nothing more than an illusion. The real lesson was not about HOA politics or parking regulations. It was about the difference between legitimate authority and manufactured power. Sarah commanded respect because she earned it through competence and character. Linda demanded obedience because she had a title and a clipboard. In the end, authentic authority always wins over artificial power. It just sometimes takes a dramatic confrontation in a suburban driveway to make that truth clear to everyone involved. Our neighborhood is peaceful now, governed by reason rather than tyranny. And every morning when Sarah parks her patrol car in our driveway, I am reminded that sometimes justice arrives exactly when and how it should, delivered by the last person the bully expected to have real power.